Part 1. The chair at the end of the table. The first sign was not the sentence. It was the chair. For 14 years, I had sat on the client side of conference room 42B, directly across from the presentation screen. That morning my chair was gone, not moved a few inches. Gone. In its place was a new black leather chair with a printed name card resting in front of it. Derek Vaughan, account director, my name, appeared at the far end of the table. Margaret Hayes, transition advisor. I stood in the doorway holding my notebook and watched the cleaning crew finish wiping fingerprints from the glass wall. Outside, Chicago was gray and windless. Cars moved along Wacker Drive 42 floors below, small and orderly from that height. I set my notebook beside the final chair, the one nearest the door. At 9:15, Evan Cole walked in carrying a coffee he had not made himself. He was 34. 11 days into his role as regional director. And already dressed like the company photograph that would eventually appear beside a press release. Dark suit, no tie. White sneakers that cost more than most employees' monthly parking. He glanced at the seating chart. "You early, I usually am." He sat in the chair that had once been mine. Then he folded his hands on the table. I wanted to speak before the announcement. I waited. He looked toward the city as if the correct language might be floating somewhere between the buildings. North Star needs a different kind of leadership. What kind? Faster, more visible. More aligned with where the company is going. I opened my notebook. He noticed. His voice became softer. Margaret, you've had an extraordinary career. I had learned to distrust praise offered in the past tense. But the truth is, you're too old to lead this team. The heating vent clicked above us. Somewhere outside the conference room, a phone rang. I wrote down the sentence, word for word. Evan watched my pen move. I don't mean old as an insult. What does it mean? Established, traditional, risk-averse. Those are different words. You know what I am saying. Yes, I said, I do. He slid an organizational chart across the table. Derek's name sat where mine had been. My name had been moved beneath his, connected by a gray line labeled continuity support. Corporate humiliation rarely looks dramatic. It arrives as formatting, a smaller font, a lower box. A calendar invitation that no longer includes you. Derek will handle the executive relationship and expansion strategy, Evan said. You'll help him transition. For how long? 3 weeks, and after that. We'll evaluate where your experience can add the most value. Experience, not leadership, not judgment. Experience had become something they wanted stored, transferred, and eventually removed. Did North Star request this change? This is an internal decision. Have they complained about my performance? No. Have you? No. Then I'd like the reason for the transition confirmed in writing. His expression tightened. This doesn't need to become adversarial. I am asking for clarity. You're still employed. That wasn't my question. He leaned back. Your title and compensation remain unchanged for now. For now, I wrote that down too. He looked at my notebook again. Is that necessary? I find memory improves when it has help. For the first time, his smile disappeared. The meeting ended at 9:42. Outside, my team sat at their desks. Marisol was reviewing a shipment schedule. Ben was on a call with Denver. Priya had 3 forecasting windows open and was eating yogurt without looking away from the screen. All 3 glanced toward me. None of them asked immediately. They saw the seating chart through the glass. Derek's name, my new place near the door. Marisol stood. What happened? Evan is changing the account structure. You're still leading? No. The word landed harder than I expected. Ben removed his headset. Priya stopped typing. Marisol looked through the glass at Evan. He has been here 11 days. Yes. And you've led North Star for 14 years. Yes, that makes no sense. It does to him. At noon, Evan announced the transition. He described Derek as the architect of North Star's next chapter. He described me as an invaluable source of institutional history. I kept my hands folded in my lap. Derek looked uncomfortable. That mattered. Not enough to refuse the role, but enough to know something was wrong. After the meeting, I returned to my desk and finished the risk review I had promised North Star by 4. I did not leave early. I did not complain. I did not tell the team what Evan had said. At 3:17, his email arrived. It confirmed that my performance had been exemplary. It also said the account required new energy, modern leadership, and stronger cultural alignment with emerging clients. I read the message twice. Then I created a folder, North Star Transition. I saved the email. At 6:30, I walked to the parking garage. The building was nearly empty. My badge still opened every door. That felt worse than if it had failed. I placed my laptop bag on the passenger seat and sat behind the wheel. I inserted the key, then I stopped. My hands were shaking, not much. Just enough that the metal key clicked against the ignition twice. I looked down at the blue company badge hanging from my neck. My photograph had been taken 12 years earlier. Brown hair, fewer lines around the eyes, same name, same employee number. I thought about calling my daughter. Instead, I placed both hands on the steering wheel and waited until they became still. The garage lights buzzed overhead. Cars passed behind me. Nobody knew I was sitting there. Nobody knew 7 words had reached into 24 years of work and reduced them to a question. Too old for what? Too old to make decisions. Too old to understand change. Too old to be seen. At 7:02, I started the car. Before pulling out, I opened my notebook. On the first clean page, I wrote, March 4, 9:15 a.m. You're too old to lead this team. Then beneath it, do not react, observe, document, decide later. I closed the notebook. At the time, I believed I was preparing to defend my job. I did not. Yet understand that the real question was whether I still wanted a life built around being needed by a company that could move my name with one click. Part 2, page 47, I joined Calder and Finch in 2002. My first desk was beside the supply closet. The copier overheated every afternoon, the elevators shook between floors, and the company still sent contract amendments by fax. I was 34, divorced, and raising a 9-year-old daughter named Emily. The job was supposed to be temporary, a stable salary, health insurance, a place to begin again. My title was Implementation Coordinator, which meant I apologized for delays caused by people with better titles. I learned because no one trained me. I kept a yellow legal pad beside the phone and wrote down everything. Which warehouse manager answered before sunrise? Which procurement director hated surprises? Which hospital required 30 days notice for a change other facilities approved in 3? I learned that business was rarely about the presentation. It was about what happened after the presentation ended. North Star entered my life 10 years later. At the time, they were a mid-sized medical supplier trying to merge 4 regional distribution systems. Calder and Finch was invited to pitch. 2 senior vice presidents were assigned. One canceled because of a family emergency. The other claimed a golf tournament with a potential investor was strategically important. I was sent to take notes. The meeting took place in a windowless conference room in Milwaukee. 12 men in dark suits discussed transformation for 40 minutes. No one asked North Star why their southern hospitals were receiving supplies 9 days late. Finally, their chief operating officer, Thomas Bell, leaned back and said, "Can anyone tell me what is actually broken?" The room went quiet. I had read the data packet the night before after Emily fell asleep. On page 47, there was a route map. Shipments from Nashville and Birmingham were both being transferred through St. Louis. That should not have happened. I raised my hand. My vice president looked horrified. Thomas nodded. "You have something?" "A question," I said. "Why are 2 southern distribution centers routing through the same northern transfer hub?" Their logistics director frowned. "They aren't." I turned the packet toward him. "They are on this map." He studied the page, then he called someone. 20 minutes later, the meeting changed. The bottleneck was real. North Star had found the problem. More importantly, they had found someone who had listened. We won the account 6 weeks later. 14 years passed. North Star grew into the largest client in our region, so did my responsibilities. I led warehouse integrations, technology migrations, acquisitions, compliance reviews, and emergency recovery projects. I trained more than 40 employees. 3 later became vice presidents. 1 became a competitor. During the pandemic, our team worked around the clock keeping hospital supply chains moving. I slept on the living room couch with my laptop open. Marisol coordinated the East Coast. Ben worked with overnight trucking companies. Priya created a model that predicted shortages before local systems could see them. Thomas called at 2 in the morning once. "You still awake?" "I wasn't planning to sleep this week." He laughed, then his voice changed. "This work matters, Margaret. I knew that was why I stayed. But competence always has a cost when you build your identity around being the person who answers." I missed Emily's middle school choir concert because a warehouse system crashed in Ohio. I arrived at her school after the auditorium had emptied. She was sitting on the front steps in a blue dress holding a folded program. "I recorded it," she said. She did not accuse me. That made it worse. Another night, she slept under my desk while I prepared for a client meeting because the babysitter canceled. She was 12. I told myself she would understand someday. Maybe she did. Understanding does not return the time. When my mother became ill, I declined a promotion that required moving to New York. Calder and Finch called that loyalty. I called it necessity. The distinction mattered less then. After one major North Star renewal, their CEO sent a handwritten letter. "You made us feel like we were your only client." I kept it in my bottom drawer, not the plaque, not the bonus statement, the letter. Because it felt like proof that the years had meant something. That was the belief I carried into the meeting with Evan. If I worked hard enough, stayed loyal enough, and became valuable enough, the company would remember. That belief was not foolish, it was incomplete. On the first Monday of the transition, Derek Vaughn arrived at my desk at 8:05 carrying a new leather notebook. He was 31, polished, bright, and clearly uncomfortable. "I didn't ask for this," he said, "but you accepted." "Yes, I respected the honesty." He sat beside me. "Evan says North Star needs a more aggressive growth strategy. North Star needs Denver stabilized." He told me Denver is on track. It isn't. I opened the dashboard. Red warning indicators filled the right side of the screen. The new inventory platform was misclassifying temperature-controlled shipments. Derek leaned closer. "How serious?" "Serious enough that we postponed the next rollout." He said the delay was procedural. Then he gave you the version that helps his presentation. Derek stopped writing. I walked him through the risk history, contracts, compliance triggers, escalation procedures, every promise we had made. He asked intelligent questions, too quickly at times. People who move fast often treat details as resistance. Until the details become consequences. At noon, Evan announced Derek's role. He called it the next evolution of North Star leadership. Nobody looked at me at first, then Marisol did. Her expression was not sympathy, it was anger. When Evan asked for questions, she raised her hand. Did North Star request a change? This is an internal strategic decision. That wasn't my question. I gave her a small shake of the head. She lowered her hand. Afterward, the team followed me back to my desk. "This is wrong," Ben said. "It is happening. That doesn't make it right." "No." Priya looked close to tears. "What do we do? Your work." Marisol stared at me. "That's it. No gossip, no sabotage, no making Derek fail." Why should we help him? Because North Star did nothing wrong. That ended the argument. The client came first. It always had. That evening, I reviewed the transition plan. 27 responsibilities had moved to Derek. My role was reduced to documentation, quality review, and ad hoc support. At 8:42, I opened the drawer and found the handwritten North Star letter. You made us feel like we were your only client, I read it once. Then I looked at the dark office around me. I had spent years making everyone feel they were my only responsibility: the company, the client, the team, my mother, my daughter. I had never asked what happened when I was no longer necessary. The next morning, Evan removed me from North Star's executive distribution list. He did not know their operations team had created a separate working group years earlier. My name was still on it, for now. Part 3 Targets and Commitments. Derek's first official meeting with North Star took place on a Wednesday. Evan scheduled 30 minutes. North Star usually required an hour. That should have warned everyone. Derek and Evan sat in the main conference room. I was asked to join remotely from my desk for historical clarification. On screen, Thomas Bell appeared with Rachel Kim, North Star's Senior Vice President of Operations, and Louis Ortega, Director of Clinical Distribution. I had worked with all three for more than a decade. Thomas looked at the participant list. Margaret, why are you in a different room? Before I answered, Evan leaned toward the camera. We re-modernizing account leadership. Derek will be the primary executive contact. Thomas did not react. Why? We believe the account is ready for faster growth. That does not answer the question. Evan smiled. Margaret remains involved. In what way? She'll support continuity. Thomas removed his glasses. Margaret, this was an internal decision, I said. His eyes stayed on mine for a second longer than necessary. He understood what I had not said. Derek began the presentation. It was polished, market projections, expansion maps. Blue graphics sliding smoothly across the screen. He proposed 2 regional conversions within 90 days. Rachel interrupted. What about Denver? Denver is on track, Derek said. I looked at the dashboard. It was not. The technical team estimates 5 to 7 weeks, Rachel said. Evan answered before Derek could. The engineering estimate is 5 to 7 weeks. Leadership is targeting 2. That was better than a direct lie, smarter. He had separated the official estimate from the number he wanted the client to hear. Rachel frowned. Are you committing to 2 weeks? Evan paused. We are confident. She turned to me. Margaret, the room became still. I could have softened it. For years, I had protected leaders in meetings without letting the client see the rescue, but this was different. A target is not a commitment. And Evan knew it. The documented technical estimate is 5 to 7 weeks, I said. 2 weeks is an internal target, not a client commitment. Evan's face remained neutral. Derek looked down. Thomas leaned forward. That distinction matters. Yes, I continued. A target belongs inside the company. A commitment belongs to the client. No one spoke for several seconds. Rachel asked for the technical report. You'll have it within the hour, I said. Evan smiled politely. Margaret, thank you for the clarification. His tone was perfect, professional, controlled. That was the moment I understood he was more dangerous than he had seemed in our first meeting. He would not attack openly. He would redefine my accuracy as resistance. After the call, he did not phone, he did not summon me, he sent an email. Thank you for supporting today's client discussion. Going forward, please route operational interpretations through account leadership before presenting them externally. Interpretations. I opened the approved technical report. Page 1 identified the defect. Page 2 described the risk. Page 3 listed 5 to 7 weeks. I replied privately. For clarity, which portion of the approved report should be treated as interpretation rather than documented fact, he did not answer. At 2:06, Rachel emailed me directly. Thank you for distinguishing the internal target from the operational estimate. Please continue ensuring material risks are stated clearly. I forwarded the message to Derek. He replied within minutes. Can we meet tomorrow morning, just us? At 6:50 the next day, he arrived carrying coffee and the leather notebook. I need the truth. About what? North Star, Denver, Evan. I looked toward Evan S. office. The lights were still off. Then I opened the risk log. For 2 hours, I taught Derek the account he had been appointed to lead. I showed him the Denver timeline, the compliance triggers, the decision history. He asked better questions than before. When we finished, he closed the notebook. Why didn't you fight the transition? I am, you haven't complained. Complaining is not a strategy. What is? Making sure the truth has somewhere to live. He looked at my notebook, the old black one. Its edges worn from years of meetings. What do you write in there? Facts, questions. Things people say when they think the moment will disappear. He almost smiled. Then he asked, do you think Evan wants me to succeed? I think Evan wants your success to belong to him. That answer stayed with him. Over the next week, Evan's strategy became clear. He did not exclude me completely. That would have been visible. Instead, he kept me close enough to provide knowledge and far enough away to deny authority. I remained copied on technical issues. Removed from executive decisions. Invited to meetings after the agenda had been set. Asked to review plans after the promises had already been made. It was not clumsy, it was deliberate. The first minute payoff came on Friday. Northstar requested clarification about Denver. The message went to Derek, not me. He called me before replying. What should I say? What do you think? He hesitated, then he dictated an answer that separated the engineering estimate from the internal target. Accurate, calm, no blame, send it, I said. He did. Rachel replied, thank you. This is the level of clarity we expect. Derek stared at the email. That felt better. Truth usually does. He looked toward Evan's office. Until someone decides it doesn't. That afternoon, Evan removed my name from Northstar's executive calendar. I saved the automated notification. Then I opened the folder. Northstar transition email by email. The story was beginning to write itself. Part 4 performance alignment. By the 4th week, my exclusion had become visible. My name disappeared from the account dashboard. The executive conference room no longer opened with my badge. A lunch with Northstar's visiting operations team appeared on everyone's calendar except mine. Marisol noticed. They forgot you. No, she looked at me. That's worse, it was. One afternoon, I walked past the break room and heard conversation stop. 2 colleagues who had worked with me for years suddenly became very interested in the coffee machine. Fear changes how people look at you. Not because they believe the accusation. Because they are afraid proximity might become evidence. I did not blame them. That did not mean it did not hurt. On Friday, Derek brought me a revised rollout plan. The Denver stabilization period had been reduced by 6 weeks. The contingency budget was gone. The staffing assumptions were impossible. Who approved this? I asked. Evan. Engineering, no. Compliance, no. Finance, no. He wants me to sign before Monday. I pushed the document back. Then ask for approvals in writing. He'll say I am not ready to lead. Leadership is not agreeing first. He expects confidence. Confidence survives questions. Derek looked down at the signature line. What happens if I refuse? You may lose his support, and if I sign, you may lose the client. He sent the email. He copied engineering, compliance, finance, and Evan. Within an hour, engineering objected. Compliance requested review. Finance refused certification. The plan died before sunset. At 5:12, a calendar invitation appeared on my screen. Performance alignment discussion Monday, 8 a.m. Organizer Evan Cole, HR included. Marisol saw the invitation. They rebuilding a case. Yes. You sound calm. I've seen cases built before. What do? You check whether the foundation is real. Over the weekend, I created a timeline, not a legal brief, not an accusation, a sequence. March 4, Evan said I was too old to lead. March 4, he confirmed my performance was exemplary. March 8, I was removed from account leadership. March 13, he presented a 2-week target to Northstar. March 13, I clarified the documented estimate. March 14, Rachel thanked me for accuracy. March 22, Evan proposed an accelerated rollout without approvals. March 22, Derek requested written authorization. March 25, HR meeting scheduled. On Monday, Claire Donnelly from HR sat beside Evan. Claire had been with Calder and Finch 15 years. She was careful, reserved, difficult to read. A folder lay in front of her. Evan began. We reconcerned about Margaret's adjustment to the new structure. Claire looked at me. What concerns specifically? Tone, collaboration. Respect for account leadership. She wrote the words, then she asked examples. Evan cited the Denver meeting. I waited. Claire turned to me. Your response. I answered a direct question using an approved technical report. Did you know your answer would contradict the stated target? Yes. Why did you answer? Because North Star asked whether 2 weeks was a commitment. Claire looked at Evan. Was it? It was a leadership target. That is not the same question. He shifted slightly. She wrote something. The meeting continued. Vague words, adaptability, alignment. Professional tone. Each time Claire asked for an example. Each example returned to an email, report, or client question. Finally, she closed the folder. I am not here to decide what anyone meant, she said. I am here to determine what can be supported. That sentence told me she had not chosen a side. Good. A fair process should make everyone uncomfortable. I placed my notebook on the table. I have one question. Claire waited. Is my age relevant to this transition? Evan became still. Why would you ask that? Claire said. Because Evan told me I was too old to lead the team. The room changed. Claire's pen stopped. When March 4th, 9:15 a.m. In conference room 42B, Evan spoke quickly. That is not the context. What was the context? Claire asked. I said the account needed younger energy. The silence lasted less than 3 seconds. It felt longer. Claire resumed writing. He had corrected himself into the same problem. The meeting ended 5 minutes later. Claire requested my notes and transition email. I agreed to provide the relevant pages. When I returned to my desk, my badge no longer opened the executive conference room. I tried once, red light, again red light. A younger employee walked behind me, saw what happened, then looked away. I stood there for a moment holding the badge against the reader. The same badge that had worked an hour earlier. That evening I sat in my car in the parking garage. Again. This time my hands did not shake. I removed the badge from my neck and placed it on the passenger seat. For 24 years, that plastic card had represented belonging. Now it represented permission. Someone else could turn it on. Someone else could turn it off. I opened my notebook. On the page beneath Evan's sentence, I wrote, a system that can erase access can erase memory unless someone documents the difference. The next morning, Thomas Bell called. Margaret, are you being removed from North Star? I already have been. Why? That is a question for Calder and Finch, we asked, and they said the transition would improve the relationship. I looked toward Evan's office. Thomas continued. Our relationship was not broken. No, I said, it wasn't. We have a quarterly review in 6 weeks. I know, I expect you there. I may not control that. Then we may need to reconsider who does. After the call, I wrote the sentence down. It was not yet a threat. It was something more dangerous. A client beginning to lose trust. Part 5, the mistake I made. Claire asked to meet privately the next afternoon. Her office was on the 39th floor, neutral carpet, frosted glass, no personal photographs. She placed my transition email on the table. Your performance history is strong, she said. No formal warnings, no client complaints. No missed targets in 7 years, correct. The transition was described as strategic modernization. Yes. Evan's language with you was different. Yes, she tapped the email. New energy, modern leadership, cultural alignment. Yes. What outcome are you seeking? The question was direct. I answered the same way, an accurate record, protection for the account. Protection for the team. Do you want the role restored? I want the decision reviewed. That isn't the same thing. No, she studied me. You re very controlled. I have had practice. Control can also become performance. That surprised me. What do you mean? You do not have to prove professionalism by pretending this had no effect. I looked at the frosted glass. It had an effect, then say so. My feelings do not change the documents. No. But they may explain your decisions. That sentence stayed with me. For weeks, I had believed emotion was something to conceal. Perhaps that belief had protected me. Perhaps it had also made me harder to reach. 2 days later, I made my first real mistake. Northstar sent an urgent question about Denver's revised risk threshold. The email went to Derek. He was in a meeting. Rachel copied me because she wanted an answer before noon. I responded. The information was accurate. The recommendation was sound. Northstar accepted it, but I did not wait for Derek. I did not call him first. I solved the problem as I always had. When he returned, he stood beside my desk holding his phone. You answered Rachel. She needed the threshold before noon. I know, you were unavailable for 40 minutes. The client needed an answer. He looked toward the team. Then lowered his voice. You tell me I am the account lead, but when the client is afraid, they still hear your voice first. I opened my mouth. Then stopped. He was right. I was protecting the account, I said. And protecting your place in it. The words were not cruel. That made them harder to dismiss. He continued, I am trying to lead. But every time you step in before I can, everyone learns that leadership still means you. I looked at my notebook. All those years of being indispensable, all those emergencies, all those moments where I had answered before anyone else could fail. I had told myself it was service. Sometimes it was. Sometimes it was control wearing the language of responsibility. You rewrite, I said. He looked surprised. I should have called thank you. I want to do it again. You may need to. Then I'll tell you first. That conversation changed both of us. Derek began asking questions without waiting for permission. I began letting him answer them, not perfectly, not immediately, but enough. The next week, Northstar requested a formal risk review. They cited conflicting communication and demanded attendance from engineering, compliance, finance, Derek, Evan, and me. Evan declined on my behalf. Thomas replied within 6 minutes. Margaret Hayes' attendance is required due to her knowledge of the implementation history. If she is unavailable, propose another date. I was added back. At the meeting, Northstar asked who had authorized the 90-day expansion plan. Evan called it a preliminary scenario. Rachel held up the document. This was sent as a recommendation. Derek looked at Evan, then at the screen. I was instructed to prepare it, he said. The direction came from Evan. The room went silent. Derek's hands trembled slightly beneath the table, but his voice did not. It was his first real act of leadership. Not because he challenged a boss. Because he accepted the cost of telling the truth. After the meeting, he remained seated. You did the right thing, I said. It didn't feel right. It rarely does. Is he going to fire me? I don't know. Were you scared when you first challenged someone above you? Yes. When did that stop? It hasn't. He laughed once. At 5:14, Claire emailed me. Do not delete or alter any records related to the Northstar transition. A formal internal review has begun. I moved the message into the folder. The paper trail was no longer mine alone. That evening, I opened my notebook. Under the line about documentation, I added, being needed is not the same as leading. It was the first sentence in the notebook that was not about Evan, it was about me. Part 6, the night shift, the internal review changed the office without an announcement. Evan's door stayed closed. Executives from New York began joining meetings. Legal appeared on calls without explanation. People lowered their voices near the elevators, then Denver failed again. A software patch created duplicate order codes across 3 hospitals. No shipments were lost, but dozens required manual verification. If Evan's accelerated plan had gone forward, another region would have been launching during the disruption. For 5 days, titles became irrelevant. We worked. At 2 a.m, the office lights reflected against the black windows. Pizza boxes covered the break room table. Priya fell asleep for 12 minutes with her forehead resting on her folded arms. Marisol stood near the windows arguing with a warehouse manager in Ohio. Ben coordinated overnight trucking. Derek led daily calls with North Star. When a North Star executive demanded to know why the defect had not been detected earlier, Derek did not blame engineering. He said, "I own the account communication. We should have escalated sooner." I watched him say it. 3 months earlier, he would have looked toward Evan. Now he held the room. Margaret, the rescuer, wanted to step in. Margaret, the mentor, stayed quiet. That was harder. My contribution came from a 2018 incident. A similar coding error had appeared after a merger. I found the old decision log and sent it to engineering. The previous fix reduced the expected recovery time by 48 hours. Thomas joined the crisis call on Thursday night. He listened to every report. At the end, he said, "This is the first meeting in a month that feels like the old team." No one answered. Then he asked who is coordinating overall response. "Derek is account lead," I said. I asked who is coordinating. Derek looked at me. "We are," he said. "Shared ownership." Thomas nodded. That is what leadership looks like. A payoff, not a promotion, not an apology, recognition of the team. The next morning, Evan made his move. He presented the crisis response to the executive committee as proof that the transition was working. His email praised Derek's new leadership model and described the shared response as an outcome of his restructuring. Marisol read the message and nearly threw her phone. He taking credit. "Yes, you are not angry. I am. You don't look angry." I am not required to perform it for him. This time I did not reply. Derek did. He sent a factual summary to the executive committee listing every contributor and the decisions each person had made. No accusation, no commentary. Just the record. North Star sent a recognition letter the same afternoon. Every team member was named. Evan was not. On Monday, Calder and Finch's chief operating officer, James Whitaker, arrived from New York. He asked me for coffee. We met in the lobby cafe. "I read the transition file," he said. "Which version?" "All of it." He took a sip of coffee. "You were told you were too old to lead." "Yes." "Why didn't you report it immediately?" I wanted to know whether it was one careless sentence or the basis of the decision, and the email answered that. He nodded. "Do you want Evan terminated?" "No." "Why not?" "Because I am not responsible for deciding the consequence." "That sounds diplomatic. It is accurate. What do you want?" "The account stable. The record corrected, the team protected. And your role?" "I haven't decided." He studied me. "North Star has." He explained that North Star had issued a formal notice of concern. They believed the transition created material risk. If they rejected Calder and Finch's remediation plan, they could trigger an early contract review. "When is the quarterly review?" I asked. 5 weeks. I thought it was 6. They moved it forward. Why? Because they want to know whether the company they trusted still exists. The next Friday, Evan stopped beside my desk. The office was nearly empty. "You've won," he said. "This isn't a competition." "Of course it is." "No," I said. "That is why you are losing." His expression changed. Not anger, recognition. For a moment, I saw the fear beneath the ambition. "You think they'll restore you?" "I don't know." "What happens if they don't?" I looked at the team area. Priya's forecasting notes. Marisol's warehouse map. Derek's notebook. The work had continued without my title. I'll still know what I did. He pressed the elevator button. Before stepping inside, he said, "You could have made the transition easier." I tried. "You corrected me in front of the client." "You were wrong in front of the client." The doors opened. He entered. "You still think experience makes you indispensable." The elevator doors began to close. This time, his words stayed with me, because part of me did. Part 7, the empty chair North Star's quarterly review took place in Milwaukee. 4 hours, 18 attendees, North Star executives. Calder and Finch leadership, legal, finance, operations, Derek, Evan, and me. My title on the agenda was Senior Advisor, Account History and Risk, not lead, not support. Something deliberately temporary. The night before I called Emily. You sound nervous, she said. I am. Good. Why is that good? You always say nerves mean the outcome matters. I say many things I dislike hearing repeated, she laughed. Then asked, what happens if they give you the account back? I don't know. What if they don't? I don't know that either. Maybe this isn't about recovering what you had. What is it about? Finding out whether you still want it. The next morning, Evan controlled the room. That was important. He was prepared. He presented the transition as modernization. He acknowledged execution challenges but framed them as growing pains caused partly by internal resistance. He used charts, targets. Industry language, he was persuasive. For 20 minutes, I wondered whether he might survive it. Then the evidence began. Rachel displayed the approved Denver estimate, 5 to 7 weeks. Then Evan's email describing the 2-week target. Then the unsigned rollout plan. Then the departmental objections. Then the message excluding me from the risk review. Each document appeared on the screen, no speeches, no dramatic accusations. Facts looked different when projected 10 feet high. Evan said the documents lacked context. Rachel asked what context changed the technical estimate. He did not answer directly. James Whittaker acknowledged failures in governance. We take responsibility, he said. That sentence shifted the room, not blame, responsibility. North Star listened, then Derek spoke. He explained that he had initially accepted Evan's direction without adequate review. I wanted to prove I was ready, he said. That made me easier to use. He looked toward me. Margaret corrected the account when I could not. No one moved. Thomas closed his notebook. Our concern is not one timeline. Our concern is whether institutional knowledge was treated as an obstacle. North Star presented 3 conditions for continuing the contract: quarterly governance reviews, joint approval of major implementation changes, and restoration of Margaret Hayes as executive account lead for 12 months. The words appeared on screen. I expected relief. Instead, I felt tired. Calder and Finch requested a recess. We moved into a smaller room. Legal discussed contract authority. Finance discussed revenue exposure. Evan sat at the end of the table. This is extortion, he said. No, I replied. It is a client using leverage. You're enjoying this. I am not. You expect me to report to you. I expect nothing. James raised his hand. Margaret, if we agree, will you take the account? The question filled the room. 3 months earlier, I would have answered immediately. Now I thought of Emily. Maybe this was not about getting back what I had. I will accept under conditions. Derek remained account director, shared leadership, direct reporting of risk. Formal recognition of the team, written authority. And I would not report to Evan. James nodded. That last condition may be resolved regardless. We returned. Calder and Finch accepted. North Star continued the contract. My role was restored. After the meeting, people gathered their papers. Thomas shook my hand. We wanted you back because you protected the relationship. Thank you. When everyone left, I remained in the conference room. The executive lead chair sat at the center of the table. The one North Star had required them to return. I placed my hand on the back, then I stepped away. I did not sit. That afternoon, Calder and Finch placed Evan on administrative leave. The email arrived while I looked out at Lake Michigan. No public confrontation, no apology from him, just a short statement. I read it once. Then closed the laptop. Recognition had arrived. But the chair no longer felt like a destination. It felt like evidence that I had spent too long asking one room to decide whether I belonged. Part 8. After the applause, my first day back as executive account lead began with a polished brass nameplate. Margaret Hayes, executive account lead. I carried it into the team area and placed it on the shared project shelf. Marisol watched. You don't want it outside the office. No, why? The work doesn't live outside the office. At 9, HR announced that Evan's employment had ended. The company confirmed there had been no performance basis for my removal. Claire said the transition had caused professional harm. The apology was formal, reviewed, necessary, it mattered, it did not repair everything. James praised the Denver response. The team received bonuses. Derek retained his role. I proposed a continuity program, cross-training, documented decision histories, shared client ownership, succession planning. James asked for a formal plan. Recognition arrived all at once. The title, the apology, the authority, the applause. Then I went home. My apartment was quiet. I placed my badge on the kitchen counter, opened a bottle of wine, did not pour it. On the refrigerator was a photograph of Emily at 12. The blue dress from the choir concert I had missed. She stood beside me smiling. I looked tired, proud. Absent even in the photograph. I opened a kitchen drawer and found an old voicemail transcription my mother had once left. You work as if the company is a person who will remember. At the time, I had laughed. Now I understood. Loyalty was not a promise the company had made. It was a promise I had made for them. I sat at the kitchen table and opened the notebook. The first page held Evan's sentence. The following pages contained emails, dates, meetings, decisions, evidence, the story of being wronged. But underneath it was another story. The number of times I stepped in before someone else could answer. The number of evenings I stayed because leaving felt like failure. The number of sacrifices I converted into proof that I mattered. Being indispensable had protected my career. It had also trapped me inside it. The next day, Derek asked whether I planned to stay. For now, that doesn't sound certain, it isn't. I thought getting the account back would fix everything. So did I. What is missing? Choice. That evening, Emily flew to Chicago for a conference. We had dinner near the river. She raised her glass. To winning, I didn't think I won. You got your job back, I got the title back. What is the difference? One is recognition, the other would be peace. She studied me. What part of the job do you love? Solving problems, building teams. Helping clients see risk early. What part do you hate? Politics, titles. Being needed for emergencies people should have prevented. That sounds like transformation work. I work for a consulting company. No, she said. You work for a company that sells consulting. That's not the same thing. The distinction stayed with me. The next morning, Rachel Kim left a voicemail on my personal phone. Margaret, I'd like to discuss your future, not the account, yours. I listened twice. Then placed the phone beside the badge on the kitchen counter. For months, I had fought to restore my place inside Calder and Finch. Now the question was whether my comeback required leaving it. Part 9, a risk worth choosing. Rachel met me at a cafe between Chicago and Milwaukee. No assistants, no agenda. She opened a leather folder. North Star is creating a transformation office. You want to hire me? We want you to consider lighting it. The title was Senior Vice President of Transformation. The compensation was higher. The authority was broader. But Rachel did not pretend it was safe. The office does not exist yet, she said. Half the board thinks it is unnecessary. Some executives will resent an external hire. If the first-year program fails, the role may disappear. That is not much of a sales pitch. It is an honest one. I respected that. What would I control? Vendor transitions, operational risk. Governance design, mentorship, authority over timelines. Shared with operations and compliance. Direct access to the COO, yes. Succession planning required. I looked at the role description. Why me? Because you protected the client without betraying your employer. You corrected false information without turning the correction into a performance. You helped the person replacing you become a leader. That does not guarantee I can build an office. No, your record does. I did not accept immediately. I hired an employment attorney, reviewed my contract, avoided company devices. Disclosed nothing confidential. For 3 weeks, I worked as if no offer existed. I completed the remediation plan, trained Derek, built the transition library. Submitted the continuity proposal. Every day the team needed me less. At first that hurt, then it freed me. One night I sat alone in the office and wrote 2 lists. Reasons to stay, history, friendship, comfort, loyalty, identity, reasons to leave, growth. Choice, future. The first list was longer, the second was alive. I signed the offer at 8:14. Not because North Star was perfect, it was not. Not because Calder and Finch was evil, it was not. I signed because the new role contained risk I had chosen. That was different from danger imposed by someone else. Rachel replied within a minute, "Welcome to North Star." I closed the laptop. For the first time in 24 years, I knew the date I would leave Calder and Finch. The decision felt both right and painful. That was how I knew it was real. Part 10. Nothing. I resigned Monday morning. James joined by video. Claire attended in person. I placed a single envelope on the table. I have accepted a position with North Star. James removed his glasses. What position? Senior Vice President of Transformation. The room became quiet. He asked whether I had used company resources. No. Shared confidential information. No. Retained counsel. Yes. Then he asked the real question. What would make you stay? Nothing. The word sounded harsher than I intended. He looked away. Compensation? No. Title? No. Then what is this about? Trust. We restored your role. North Star required you to. That is unfair. Yes, I said, some things are. He asked whether the company had failed me. Yes, whether he had failed me. Yes, he accepted the answer. Then he apologized, no qualifiers. No legal language, just 2 words, I am sorry. The apology mattered because it did not ask me to stay. Afterward, I told the team. Priya cried, Ben went quiet, Derek looked frightened. Marisol became angry. They finally give you the account back and now you leave. Yes, what about us? You continue. With who? With Derek. He shook his head. I am not ready. You are more ready than you think. Marisol crossed her arms. You taught us loyalty. I taught you responsibility. You made this decision alone. Some decisions belong to the individual. That is convenient. Her words landed. She was right to be hurt. A correct decision can still wound people. I could not explain that away. I am sorry, I said. She looked at me. That doesn't fix it. No, we stood in silence. I wanted to give her a perfect answer. There was none. People often experience another person's growth as abandonment. Sometimes they are not wrong. That night, I wrote in the notebook, freedom does not mean leaving without consequences. It means accepting the consequences you choose. Part 11, the notebook. My final 4 weeks were the busiest of my career. I created a transition library, every major decision, every contract history, every failure and recovery, not private opinions, useful memory. Derek and I met each morning. He led, I observed. When he asked what I would do, I asked what he thought first. He hated that at the beginning. By the second week, he stopped asking for permission. One Tuesday, he escalated an Ohio distribution issue earlier than I would have. He was right. You would have waited, he said. Yes, was I wrong? No, that feels strange. Confidence can survive disagreement. On my final Wednesday, I presented the continuity program to the executive committee. What happens, I asked, when the person who knows why a decision was made is no longer in the room? The program was approved nationally. Afterward, a 26-year-old analyst named Sophia approached. How do I know when to push back? Ask whether you are protecting your ego or the work, and if it is the work, speak. What if they don't listen? Document, she smiled. I heard that about you, mostly notebooks. On my final Friday, the team held a small lunch. Sandwiches, cake, too many photographs. At 3, I packed my desk, 2 boxes, 24 years. Before leaving, I handed Derek a new black notebook. He opened the cover. Inside, I had written, write down facts, question assumptions. Leave room to change your mind. He looked at my old notebook. You re-keeping that one? Yes, why? It reminds me that evidence is not only what other people did, it is also what I believed. At 5, Claire collected my badge. The same badge that had once opened every door. The same badge that later flashed red. Now I handed it over by choice. The team stood near the elevators. I had asked them not to applaud, they ignored me. Marisol hugged me last, she was still hurt, still proud, both could be true. The elevator doors opened. Derek stood beside me. What do I do Monday? Read your email. I am serious, so am I, he laughed. Then asked, what if North Star asks for you? Tell them I work for them now. The doors began to close. Margaret, yes. I am glad they were wrong about you. I pressed the open button. They were not wrong about my age, I said. They were wrong about what age meant. Then the doors closed. The elevator descended 42 floors. For the first time, I was leaving without needing anyone to stop me. Part 12, making room. My first day at North Star was imperfect. My office was still being painted. My computer had not arrived. Someone misspelled my name on the temporary badge. It was exactly the kind of beginning I needed. Real beginnings are rarely cinematic, they look unfinished. The transformation office had 9 employees. The youngest was 28. The oldest besides me was 62. At our first meeting, I stood before a blank whiteboard. I asked 3 questions. What do you know? What do you need to learn? What are you afraid to say? The answers built the office. Over the next 2 years, we created joint governance systems, cross-generational mentorship, decision histories, and succession plans. We made mistakes. 1 project exceeded budget. 1 mentorship pairing failed. 1 executive tried to bypass the process. We adjusted. Derek led the Calder and Finch account. Marisol moved into operations leadership. Priya's forecasting model expanded nationally. The continuity program grew without me. That became the most important proof of my career, not that I was indispensable, that the work could continue. 2 years later, I returned to Calder and Finch for a joint leadership summit. This time, I entered as the client. The receptionist printed a visitor badge. I took the elevator to the 42nd floor. The conference room looked almost the same. Glass walls, gray sky, long table. At the far end was the chair where my name had once been moved. Sophia, now promoted, stood near the presentation screen holding a risk report. A senior executive interrupted her. She waited. Then said calmly, I'd like to finish the risk explanation before we commit to the date. The room allowed her to continue. During the break, I noticed she was about to sit at the far end of the table, the old transition chair. I pulled out the chair beside mine. Sit here, I said. You representing next? She sat. I opened my old notebook. On the first page, you re too old to lead this team. I turned to the final page. For a moment, I held the pen above the paper. Then I wrote they were wrong about the team. I closed the notebook. For years, I had tried to prove I still belonged in the room. My real comeback began when I stopped measuring leadership by where I sat and started making room for someone else. I did not need Evan to regret what he said. I did not need Calder and Finch to beg me to stay. I did not need North Star to save me. The strongest comeback was not returning to the chair they had taken. It was building a life where the chair no longer defined me. At 58, someone told me I was too old to lead. At 60, I finally understood leadership. It was not being the person everyone depended on. It was creating people, systems, and courage strong enough to continue when you were no longer there. I placed the notebook on the table, Sophia began her presentation, and this time I listened.